What's up, everyone? Bales here with another one of our MLB DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Friday, September 17th. We have a massive 15-game slate. There is a lot to go over, just a plethora of pitchers, a ton of hitters, everything that you could possibly want on this slate, which tends to be the case when there's 15 games. I will say, it's really kind of weird at this point, I guess, that no one truly sticks out that much. I don't think that there's any pitcher that you absolutely have to use, anything like that. I will say there are some leans that I have, and we will get into all of that as I go over my favorite pitchers, hitters, and stacks, and then also give a home run call for the video. But before we get started, if you enjoy the content, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. You can turn on the notifications by clicking the little bell. Leave any comments you have. There's way too much, basically, for me to hit on every single thing that I'm thinking throughout this video. So please, by all means, leave any questions you have in the comments. I will answer them throughout the day. If you have any home run calls, anything you really like or anything, just go ahead, drop that in the comments section below. You can find all of our free content at dfskarma.com. You can get all of our sports betting information, everything at betkarma.com. You can also hop into our free Discord at chatdfs.com. I feel like tonight's a really good night to jump into our Discord, just because stuff more or less will be changing a little bit depending on lineups. And when you have this many pitchers, kind of the guys that are starting, I guess in the starting lineups actually, do matter a little bit more because there's so many different ways to go. You're going to have pitchers that are super close to each other, and just having that small edge makes a lot of sense, which obviously we will be discussing throughout the day leading up until lock into in our free Discord. But also you can get our core plays at dfskarma.com. All of that is below in the description. All you have to do is click the little show more. And you can find all of the links to that. Our core plays gets you, all of our cores and everything, along with our premium Discord channel. You get the outstanding projections that can also be found on the site. Those are done by Sam. He's done a great job. And we also have a ton of NFL content. Obviously, this is an MLB podcast, but a lot of people do cross over between sports, and we have plenty of NFL content already on the site. More will be coming out today, so go ahead and check all of that out. And you can go to our YouTube channel. Ben and Anthony outlined their cash process. That is already posted. We also have the main NFL pod that we do. That was Ben, myself, and Matt this week. So I guess that about does it for everything that I kind of wanted to go over. We can shift into the actual slate here and kind of go over what I'm looking at. In terms of pitching, we can start out. I think there are several options at the top of pitcher that I feel like are reasonable. The number one for me is probably going to be Zach Wheeler. 10-6 is a high price tag, but he's throwing more or less at a Cy Young level this season. I don't necessarily love the matchup against the Mets. Their offense has been heating up in recent games, and they're not striking out at that high of a rate. But at the same time, I'm one to generally put elite pitching over hot hitting. So Zach Wheeler is going to lead the way for me at 10-6. The next guy that I feel like it is the not really a spend up, but one of the higher priced on this slate is probably Dylan Cease. I'm not overly high on Cease. I don't think he's going to ever turn into an ace or anything. He's a very solid pitcher. But he gets a good matchup against the Texas Rangers. Their offense has been absolutely atrocious. I believe a team WOBA under 3 over the last 14 days, although they aren't striking out at that high of a rate. That's the only more or less concern that I have here. But I do think that Dylan Cease is going to make a relatively safe option, and he does bring his own upside into the games. And then you have Walker Buehler and Logan Webb in between those two. Fine with either one of them in tournaments. It's just I have them both a tier below Cease and Wheeler. I would prefer, especially in cash, to just take the safety of Wheeler and Cease for a little bit lower of a price tag there, rather than play someone like Walker Buehler in Cincinnati and Logan Webb, who has been throwing at just an absolutely elite level. But the matchup against Atlanta isn't something that I necessarily love. Any of those four can be used as we drop down a little bit more. One guy that's super interesting is Corey Kluber. He's 9,000 on DraftKings, which I feel like is at least relatively appropriately priced. I think it's probably a little bit high since he's not throwing at the high level that he normally does. His xFIP on the season, granted limited innings, is 4.3. With that said, he gets an absolutely great matchup against the Cleveland Indians. I believe they're changing to Guardians. Is that next season? But Cleveland has been one of the worst offenses in the MLB over the last 14 days. Over that span, they're also striking out almost 27% of the time. So Corey Kluber is an interesting pivot off of Cease, who's probably going to get the ownership in that range. And then also on FanDuel, I believe he's only 7,700, which is just a gross misprice in my opinion. He should be throwing, assuming all goes well, over 90 pitches. I think he got to like 86 in his last game. So I do think that Kluber is in play. For me, probably not in cash games, but 100% fine for tournaments. A few other guys around the range of that I kind of want to discuss. Hyun-Jin Ryu at 8,600 gets a plus matchup against the Minnesota Twins. And German Marquez at 8,800 gets a matchup on the road against the Washington Nationals. I like both of them. I think they're both very reasonable tonight. I probably have each of them slightly below Kluber. But at the same time, if you absolutely can't get the extra money, or if you just want to get a little bit different than what I'm looking at in tournaments, both of them make very good options. You can keep dropping down, and you'll find more or less at least one option in basically every pricing tier. So at 8,400, there's two guys that I would at least consider. Zach Plesac gets the matchup against New York in New York, which adds plenty of volatility, I guess I would say, to specifically to the matchup. But when you look at the Yankees over the last 14 days, Team WOBA 297. Not good at all. Strikeout rate, 24.2%. It's just their offense hasn't been what most people thought it was going to be. Now, anytime you play in Yankee Stadium, you have the potential to just go off, and it's not like Zach Plesac is this untouchable pitcher or anything. He's actually pretty bad, and I'll say the same for the other guy at 8,400, Luis Patino. I think that he's relatively fine in the matchup as well because there's strikeout upside, but Plesac and Patino, neither one of them have good advanced metrics. You're just kind of throwing them in there because they do have upside in the specific matchups. Patino gets the matchup against Detroit, who does have some pop as an offense, but also strikes out quite a bit. So at 8,400, those are two guys that are 100% tournament options for me. If you want to drop down to 8,200, Josiah Gray, also 100% tournament. You're not going to use him in cash games. Surprisingly, his xFIP is actually the second highest on the slate, below only Keegan Aiken at 5.22. Josiah Gray sits at 5.13, and his home run per nine is over 3 on the season. Obviously, he does have somewhat of limited innings, but I was expecting him to be significantly better than this. It just hasn't been the case. His ERA is up at 6 as well. His strikeout rate is mediocre. The reason he's in play, also matchup play. Colorado Rockies in Washington, and we know that the Rockies do have one of the worst road offenses in the entire MLB. So I do believe that Gray can more or less be used in tournaments. I would probably rank him below Patino and below Plesac. I think the three are interesting. I also don't think that this is really the range that you want to be living in. 8,600 Hyun-Jin Ryu, I feel like is just significantly better than them. And then you can actually drop down and get other options that I would be more interested in. At 7,100, Adrian Hauser gets the matchup against the Chicago Cubs. They're not the offense to the point where they can't even touch the ball at the moment, but the strikeouts are 100% still there. You're not really going to project a ton of strikeouts for someone like Adrian Hauser or anything, but He's not necessarily a bad pitcher, and it's kind of a fine spot for 7,100. The other guy that I like slightly more than him at 6,800 is Eliezer Hernandez. He gets a plus matchup against the Pittsburgh Pirates. They are an offense that just isn't overly good. Unlike some of the other ones, they don't strike out all that much. I'm not expecting a ton of strikeouts from Eliezer Hernandez anyway, and at 6,800, you don't really need them. And then if you want to kind of get weird with some of these cheaper guys, we have bad pitchers in great matchups, specifically two of them. I don't necessarily want to use them, but I feel like just for the purpose of them being in such good matchups, I'll kind of say them on stream so you guys can make the decision if you trust their advanced metrics. I guess if you trust the bad pitching or you trust the bad hitting. Cole Irvin is not a good pitcher at all. xFIP at 4.82. He doesn't give up a ton of home runs, which is nice, but he also, his strikeout rate's sitting only at 16%. Gets the matchup against the Los Angeles Angels. Team WOBA over the last 14 days, under 3. Strikeout rate, roughly 25%. So it's tough, but at 6,600, I feel like it's at least reasonable to give them some consideration. And then the other option is Will Crow, who xFIP 4.99, strikeout rate is at 20.7%, so at least a small amount of upside there. More importantly, gets a matchup against the Miami Marlins, who over the last 14 days, Team WOBA 2.85 and a strikeout rate almost at 28%. It's tough because he's also throwing in Miami, which is a pitcher-friendly stadium. I mean, I don't necessarily know how I want to go on this slate. I know that there's a lot that we kind of covered there, and just plenty for us to attack. I don't want to waste the entire time just talking about one position, though we're already pretty deep into this video, so I will move to stacks. If there's any comments or questions that you guys have on pitching, feel free to start a conversation in the comment section below. I will respond throughout the day. As we get to stacks, there's a few stacks that kind of stick out a little bit. I guess number one, you're going to have to look at the Toronto Blue Jays. They've been just on absolute fire as an offense. They get a plus matchup against Michael Pineda, which I'm not scared of whatsoever. The problem obviously will always be the Blue Jays, especially if you want to spend up on someone like Zach Wheeler tonight. Some other options, the Houston Astros, they get the matchup against Madison Bumgarner and the Arizona Diamondbacks bullpen, which is one of the worst in the MLB. They'll also be playing in Houston, so they keep the DH in this game. The Milwaukee Brewers against Zach Davies, playing in a hitter-friendly stadium in Milwaukee. If you want to take a shot on a team like the Yankees, no issues whatsoever with that. I'm not like dead set on Plesac or anything. I just think that he has upside. It's very, very much in the realm of possibilities that he gets absolutely rocked, and the Yankees are one of the highest scoring teams on the entire slate. Outside of that, just guys that kind of stick out. Stacks that kind of stick out a little bit. I think you can take a shot on Tampa Bay, the Chicago White Sox, a bunch of the stacks that kind of always make sense. If you want to get weird, the Colorado Rockies, just with them being on the road, they're not going to be very owned on this slate. Miami, you can take a shot on them with Will Crow being such a bad pitcher, but again, just a super risky. Someone like Seattle, I don't have any issues with against Brady Singer. St. Louis against San Diego and Vince Velasquez. Just a lot of different ways that you can go on the slate. So let's break down some position by position. Once again, there's just no way that I'm going to be able to outline all plays that at least are reasonable. So as always, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in at catcher. I feel like there's two options that really, really stick out. Number one, Omar Narvaez at 4,400 gets the matchup against Zach Davies. Should be hitting fifth in the Milwaukee lineup, obviously at his best against right-handed pitching. Number two, Yasmani Grandal. He's looked outstanding against lefties. He gets the matchup against Taylor Hearn in Texas. Assuming, I believe when they face lefties, he moves up to about 4th in the lineup. So paying up for 5,300, I think that he is the priority spend up on this slate. And then if you want to save salary, assuming he's in the lineup, Martin Maldonado against Madison Bumgarner makes sense. You can go with someone like Alex Jackson for 2,800 against Will Crowe. If you need to go basically all the way down, Cal Raleigh at 2,400 against Brady Singer. I think that all of those are completely fine. But again, if you're spending up Yasmani Grandal, if you're looking in the mid-tier, Omar Narvaez, those two stick out kind of by far the most to me. Moving to first base, I think it's clear-cut that you're 100% fine getting to Vlad Guerrero Jr. if you can. The only problem is obviously he's almost 6,000. At the moment, Shohei Ohtani isn't on the slate, but I'm sure DraftKings will add him relatively soon as they fully announce their starting pitching and that it's not him. But outside of the 5,900 Vlad Guerrero Jr., Yuli Gurriel seems a bit underpriced at 4,600. Anthony Rizzo at 42 makes a lot of sense. And Jose Abreu at 45. All three of them are pretty much underpriced in my opinion. I feel like all can be used in basically all leagues on this slate. And then if you absolutely need to spend down, Lewin Diaz is the bare minimum, 2,000. I feel like that's probably where I go. If you have a little bit extra money, Dan Vogelbach at 2,500 or Carlos Santana at 26 do make sense. But if you're wasting, I say wasting kind of relatively because of the positions, and we have a lot of really good options at first base, but if you're just spending, I would probably go all the way down to Lewin Diaz so you can basically do whatever you want elsewhere. Moving to second base, Jose Altuve has to be the top option for me. He's 5,000. Initially, I was going back and forth on Marcus Semien, but I would rather just save $600. You get Altuve against Madison Bumgarner and the Arizona bullpen. I just think that's really, really solid. My hope would be that you can find a way to make Altuve work on this slate because I feel like he's more or less better than everyone else. 3,900, you have Colton Wong and DJ LeMahieu. I think if you're using a Yankee stack, LeMahieu's 100% fine to use there. But if you're just choosing between the two because they're the exact same price, I probably lean Colton Wong. You can also, if you're spending up, the guy that will be super low owned, Brandon Lau. 5,400 obviously gets the matchup against Casey Mize, and he generally leads off against right-handed pitching. So Lau makes a lot of sense, especially because people are going to move up to Marcus Semien if they're moving off of Jose Altuve there. So I doubt that Lau gets much ownership on the slate. Outside of that, the other guy that I guess that I would mention here would probably be Tommy Edman. I don't necessarily love him, but I think he's relatively fine for his price tag. And then if you need to get cheap or something, I would say that Tommy La Stella at 3,200, just assuming he's leading off for the San Francisco Giants, is at least reasonable. Moving to third base, Alex Bregman, his price is slowly creeping up, but 4,400 for how well he's been playing in a matchup against Bumgarner tonight is just still way too cheap. I mean, I don't feel like I have to say that much more at the position just because it's so clear-cut to me that Bregman is the guy that I'm going to try to use. Pivoting off of him, I think that Eduardo Escobar for 200 more makes sense. You can go up to someone like Kyle Seager in a plus matchup against Brady Singer, but he's all the way up at 5,300, which is more or less where Bregman should be priced. And then you have someone like Nolan Arenado, who I'm not opposed to. Yoan Moncada still a bit underpriced at 4,000. And then if you need to get super cheap, Phil Gosselin's 2,800 and gets a good matchup against Cole Irvin. I feel like that's probably where I go if you absolutely need to save salary here. But once again, for like the 20th consecutive day, Alex Bregman is the pretty clear-cut option for me at this position. Moving to shortstop, it's kind of tough. Corey Seager's the guy that I want to go to at 4,200. It's just too cheap for how good he is. The problem is he gets a matchup against Luis Castillo, so I don't necessarily know if that's exactly where I'll be going. I do think that at 4,200, Miguel Rojas against Will Crow also makes sense. If you can spend up a little bit more, Carlos Correa is only 4,700. And then obviously, if you can get to someone like Bo Bichette or Tim Anderson at 51 or 54, both make sense. If you cannot get there, it's pretty clear cut that Nicky Lopez at 3,500 is still way underpriced, especially in a matchup against someone like Chris Flexen. He has been just absurdly consistent, and I feel like it's kind of tough to move off of him, especially in cash games where he's just been so good and obviously can use the speed to bring upside as well. That about does it for shortstop. We can move to outfield, where I can already tell you there's going to be 8 million plays on this slate that you can actually use. So I'm just going to kind of break down a few of my favorites. And then obviously, once again, in the comments, just drop any plays that you are wondering about, and I will let you guys know. Luis Robert should be hitting second against left-handed pitching, and all of his metrics just look absolutely amazing. 4,700 is still a bit too cheap. I feel like he should be over 5K, but he's an outstanding play. Right next to him at 4,800 is Austin Meadows against Casey Mize. I'm fine with him in all leagues for his price tag. The quote-unquote high-priced guy that's a bit too cheap is going to be Christian Yelich at only 4,200 against Zach Davies. 100% fine with him in all leagues. You have the Houston guys. Not 100% sure who they're going to throw out, but if they use Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, people may be off of them because it's lefty-lefty. That doesn't bother me. I would use either one of them against Bumgarner, especially with how bad you have the Arizona bullpen. And then getting cheaper, you have like Jake Myers. A few other options. Just depends on who Houston's deciding to start. Keeping it with the cheap options, Corey Dickerson is only 2,700. Obviously gets the matchup against Pineda in Toronto's offense, so he should see plenty of opportunities to score fantasy points. Once again, in their offense as well, if you want to spend up, George Springer at 4,900, 100% fine with him. At 4,600, you have Teoscar Hernandez, also completely fine with him. I mean, that's a relatively solid amount of players already, and I guess like Chase McCormick is 2,000. Like it's hard not to at least consider him. De La Cruz 2,800 in a matchup against Will Crow. 100% fine if you want to use someone like him. Even Kevin Kiermaier at 2,700 against Casey Mize feels a bit too cheap. 2,400. I hate using Brett Gardner, but you have to at least consider him, assuming he's hitting near the top of the New York lineup. So, I mean, a lot of different ways to go here in the outfield. If you have any questions, again, drop them in the comments. I will give my home run call now. I feel like the very obvious option is going to be Bobby Dahlbeck. Just dominates left-handed pitching, gets the plus matchup against Keegan Aiken. So Dahlbeck at 3,300, just way too cheap for the home run upside. I do think that he's a very solid option if you want to just look specifically at home runs, but I will give someone else off of him. I will say Jose Abreu. So Jose Abreu and Bobby Dahlbeck, 2 home run calls on this one. I know we've been super hot on the home run calls throughout the season, but I think that they're both in really good options against left-handed pitching. Love them both in these spots specifically to show off their power. So Bobby Dahlbeck and Jose Abreu are the 2 that I'm going with. Once again, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We have a ton of content that just keeps rolling out, and it's only going to be more once NBA starts as well. So thank you for watching again. Good luck tonight. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we will be back on Monday with another stream.